Good morning, John. Can you give me like one moment, sir?
Can you can
And
you
I
hear
apologize.
can you hear me?
Huh?
Can
Yeah,
you
can
hear?
you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
Good.
Can you give me just a moment? And I apologize for my tardiness.
No problem.
Just wrapping up another podcast. All right, hold on one second. I'll be
Sure.
right back. I ran off the camera. I just went to see Diana Ross the other day in concert.
You're
And
ki-
when I
you're,
ran off
you're
the
kidding me.
camera just now, I said, "Oh, I should do a costume change." But
Wow. I
anyway,
didn't I didn't I didn't think she was still performing. She's got to be what, mid 80s?
yeah, she's in her 80s. I didn't think she was performing either. I'll tell you what, it was a great performance too. I wasn't
I
putting
bet
much.
tickets were expensive, right?
Yeah, you know what? I got them for free, John. So it worked out really well.
Oh,
I got
really? How'd you do
some
that?
free tickets. Sometimes they'll give you some free tickets to some amazing
No
concerts.
kidding. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Well, lucky
anywho,
you. Yeah.
yeah, me and my wife we really enjoyed it. We went out the other day and it was really we got out of the concert and just standing there just looking at everyone's faces that came out. Everyone had a big smile. They were really excited. Like it was a good performance.
One of the few people you talk to probably knows who Diana Ross is, right?
Yeah, I know. I know.
Right.
I know. But it was to her credit, there were some, some younger generational people who were in the audience and they got they got a treat. So it was pretty good. All right. So we got any questions before we get going?
First, I should say thank you for your service because I did some due diligence on you and found
Oh,
out your
thanks, John.
background. So
Okay, I
thank,
appreciate that.
thank you for your service. And I'm just curious because back in the day, when podcasting was just starting,
Mm-hmm.
I created a podcast in February of '06 and
Okay.
did it for about 7, 8 years.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I know what it's like being on your side of the microphone, and it's a lot of fun, right?
Yeah, it is. You get to meet a lot of great people and learn things to get different perspectives, right? So,
Yeah, and I was just trying to figure out what your business is because I'm guessing your revenue stream is not coming from your podcast.
no, no, not at all. Great question. Great question, John. So, eventually, because right now there is no business that's tied to this podcast, it's all about learning. So, I'm in the process of writing a book. The book will focuses on like hindsight, looking back, decisions, pivot points, getting to know who you are, the power of storytelling. It captures all of these different topics, right? So it'll be a branch point to sell the book, for one thing, and then two, I'm looking at probably not this year, to be fair, John. Sometime next year to work on a course. Just because everything takes time, you get it. You know how it is. That's why I'm talking to you today. But to start a course and then potentially go into coaching. Me and a friend of mine, we were actually looking at being consultants, right? Because we're both in the supply chain space for my
Still, are
regular
you
job.
still doing that?
Yeah, I still do supply chain. Absolutely. Yep.
What kind of supplies are you chaining?
So for me, I provide a service. So it's not truly, it's a part of supply chain. So we provide a service for our clients or our customers where we manage their inventory. So that takes a lot of pressure off of them to have to go in and count and like, oh shoot, we're missing this particular drill or we're missing this thing. And they also don't have to do purchasing, all the stuff like that. We take care of it in my department.
So is that your day job?
That's my day job. Yes, sir.
Has that come out of your military experience?
It's different. Accountability of inventory comes out of my military experience. In the military, I didn't really have to, be concerned about profits and making money. So there was some learning curves, just understanding I just can't spend willy nilly on things. I have to be really strategic. And then also tracking trends on what makes sense for us to provide that service to and what doesn't, and then providing that feedback to our clients and just having those conversations. So it took a lot. A lot of the skills did transition from the military, but I had to learn a few when I got out as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long have you been podcasting?
I started, funny enough, I started this podcast with a friend of mine that I was talking about. And it was once we transitioned from the military. So it was about 2017.
Okay.
So we did it for a few years, then we stopped, and this was all audio, so it wasn't a video podcast.
Okay.
We did an audio podcast. COVID hit at some point. Well, 2020, we stopped. We're both in supply chain, big supply chain disruptions, right? So we had to really focus in on our day jobs. And then once it started to get kind of back into the flow of things, I started it back up last year in 2024. And I said, I wanted, actually 2023, 2024, I turned it into a video podcast.
Okay.
So that's why, we're talking to each other
Do you
now
do you
on video.
pay attention to the metrics and the analytics and all that stuff?
Yes, I do. And I'm learning every day. It's a struggle,
Yeah.
but I do pay attention to it. I look at podcast episodes that are favorable. The numbers are trending higher than others, and try to figure out what is it that made that episode special. Is it that they had a large audience themselves and they, push this message or push this podcast to their audience, or was it something that resonated in the keywords or the SEO, things like that. So I'm constantly learning. I'm definitely not where I want to be in those numbers. And 2025 was a year to really focus in and hone and grow the podcast numbers and the podcast reach. So that's my
Okay.
goal.
Do
So
you
we'll
have
see
any
where we're
people
at.
that you're working with that know that stuff that can kind of guide you along, or are you just kind of listening?
Hmm.
I mean, there's so many podcasts,
Yeah.
including ones that cover how to do a great podcast and grow your podcast business. So
Yeah.
that's probably all you really need to do is just pay attention to those guys, right?
Yeah, I do a little bit of both because my podcast is really not, it's educational more than entertainment. So whenever I look at those how to grow your podcast, right, it's all about these different, not gimmicks, but ways to do things that are more entertaining. So I just try to bring my authentic self. I try to get better in my conversations with my guests. When I started, I just had a list of questions and I just asked questions back and forth, pretty straightforward. But then
Right.
I said, that's not really me, and I'm trying to mimic somebody else. So now I just try to be myself, and I come in and I'm in the moment with you. I really want to hear what you have to say. I really want to learn.
Yeah.
And I look at it from a perspective of I just met John. John's a new friend of mine. We're building our relationship.
That's good. I've
Yeah.
as you know from my background bio, I've probably been on close to 90 podcasts in the past 3
Hmm.
years. Mainly because there's so many podcasts, and once a friend of mine introduced me to Podmatch and
Hmm.
the other matchmaker.
Hmm.
Initially, it was to promote a documentary film that I made, and then
Hmm.
I kind of when I stumbled on so many that deal with the themes that you and I are going to be talking about, I thought, well, maybe I have something to offer those podcast shows,
Yeah.
and I can tell you that there are really good podcast hosts and there's some really bad podcast hosts, and it's a pleasure when I come across someone like yourself that seems genuinely interested,
Hmm.
knows a little bit about my background, and is prepared to dig in a little bit deeper, and doesn't start the conversation with, so John Follis, tell us about yourself. I mean, I just think that if as a guest,
Yeah.
the hosts that are good know about their guest and are willing
Hmm.
to make it seem like they know who they are and give them a
Yeah.
little bit of intro, and act like they're happy to have them on the show, rather than, I don't know who you are, tell us who you are.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now that is one of the things that I do. Now I will give a bio, but because it's called hindsight, right? I like to ask, tell me a little bit more about who you are and how you got to be who you are today, right? So I spend that in there because I do want to look at pivot points. I do want to look
Of
at
course.
crucial decisions,
Yeah.
through your journey. So I like to start it off there, and then then we get to it.
Yeah, I'm just talking, after the first 30
Yeah,
second or 45-second intro, and then, whatever you want to ask is fine.
yeah.
Nothing is off limits.
All right, awesome. You ready?
Oh yeah.
We're already going anyway, so
Okay.
okay.
So it's all editing, right?
Yes, sir. All right.
When you look back in hindsight, everything is 2020. In hindsight, we make mistakes, we're learning from it. In hindsight, yesterday and your tomorrow. In hindsight, is so much clearer now.
What does it take to build a career that leaves a lasting impact? Today's guest, John Follis, did just that, co-founding one of Madison Avenue's most awarded ad agencies and later pioneering digital marketing. He's a seasoned ad executive, documentary filmmaker, and one of the first podcasters in the industry. In this episode, we dive into John's journey, the lessons he's learned, and how you can apply them to your own career and creative pursuits. Good morning, John. Good morning, John. I don't know where you're calling from, so it may be a little later than good morning. I gotta
It's
preface it with that.
just afternoon. I'm just outside of New York, so it's just afternoon here.
There you go. So good afternoon. How you
Yeah, hi
doing
Lee.
today?
How are you? Good to see you.
I'm doing good.
Pleasure being on your show.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure having you. And I'm really looking forward to getting into some insights because you have a lot of the skills and the knowledge that I'm looking for, right? And hopefully some of the listeners are looking for as well. So I'm really excited about this episode and this conversation that we're about to have. Now, in the intro, I did tell you a little bit about who you are. I told you, and I told the listeners a little bit about who you are. But do you mind sharing a little bit about really who you are and how you got to be who you are today?
Wow.
Did that make sense? Do I need to re-say that?
That is a big question to start off with. Wow, it's I'm glad it's not morning here because I have a few hours of being awake to actually focus.
I know. Go get your cup of coffee.
Who am I and how do I? Okay. Well, gosh. Right now I'm a guy who's retired.
Okay.
Who is in the very fortunate position to be able to do whatever they want to do, which is why I'm really enjoying being on your show because, as you mentioned, I had a long successful career in advertising, but it was also, it didn't come easy. One thing you didn't mention is that in the first 8 years of my career, I got fired 4 times. And all of my success, which not only included co-founding an ad agency in New York, but also being honored at the White House, and then 6 months later being honored at the United Nations with a special award.
Yeah.
All of that happened after I was fired 4 times in the first 8 years of my career. So for any of your audience members who may be listening to this and finding it challenging, whatever their challenge may be with their career, my hope is that going on a podcast show like yours, that maybe I can say something that can give them some hope or inspiration. And that's what I like doing now.
I love it. Wow. So, wow. Yeah, I didn't say about the White House, and I didn't say about, you said United Nations?
Yeah, well, I didn't mention that to you. I didn't want to put too much in the intro. I figured it might come out in the conversation. So, yeah.
All right, so let's take it back then. All right, well, I want to talk a little bit about impact. what's your definition of impact? And, from a marketing and ad perspective, right? And how has impact, how has that shaped your career?
That's a great question, and that's a great word because I use it a lot, or I should say, I used to use it a lot when I was more active in the business. Um, because
Mm-hmm.
um, anything you do from an advertising or marketing perspective cannot be successful if it doesn't have impact. And what that
Mm-hmm.
means is, first of all, it's got to grab someone's attention, number one, and which, quite honestly, a lot of advertising and marketing fails at. Doesn't grab your attention.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing to do, by the way. There's just so much is coming at people all the time. It's become more challenging than ever, I think, to break through and have that impact. But any successful advertising marketing campaign has to get someone's attention. And then once it does, it's got to very quickly touch a nerve in them that gets them to pay attention. You just can't show a naked person and then expect that that's going to communicate your message or get your point across. It's got to touch them on a personal level somehow that makes them want to continue to listen to that message after that initial impact. And then ultimately do it in such a way that gets them to respond. Because at the end of the day, Lee, as you know, if they don't respond, you're not going to have any sales.
Right. Wow. That sums it up.
And that's, I have to say, our agency was very successful because the style of work that we did was very impactful. In many cases, it was challenging to sell our ideas to the client because they would look at the idea and say, "Whoa, I don't know if I want to do that. That's a little bit, edgy, too edgy." So my style of creative work was stuff that sometimes ruffled some feathers, but if you don't do the kind of work that ruffles some people's feathers, it's probably not going to be that impactful. Because you can't do something that's impactful and not directed toward a mass audience and not have it ruffle someone's feathers for some reason, right?
Yeah.
It just has to be responsible. You just can't do something stupid, just to get the attention. A lot of advertising fails just because they do stupid stuff just to get your attention, and it's not relevant to the product or message. So anything that you do that grabs attention has to be relevant to the message or the product that you're trying to promote.
So you say you need to be responsible, ethically, I guess, responsible as well. So, like, how do you feel about today's advertising industry? Like, how do you think you would have fared in this industry? Because I don't know. Some things seem ethically, fair, and then some kind of don't. What do you think?
I would like to think that I would do well. I don't pay attention to it that much because I don't have to. For example, the big thing now is AI. I don't know how much experience you've gotten involved with AI, but as you mentioned, when podcasting came out in 2005, I was all over it. I said, this is a very fascinating technology. I want to learn more about it. And a few months after hearing about it, I had a podcast show in early 2006. So if I was active right now, I would be all over AI. I would know, more about it and be able to talk about that with my clients. But, how I would be impactful today, I think that if you got the DNA of a creative person that knows how to get attention, AI is just another tool, right? It's just another tool in your toolbox, and you just have to incorporate it to help grease the wheels to communicate your message. So
that makes sense.
I think it's important for anyone who's active right now is to not be intimidated by it, to realize that it's not going away. It's kind of like, I mean, I'm old enough to date myself and say, I remember when there was no internet, and I remember when the internet was kind of a new thing, almost like what AI is now. And I know a lot of my peers just kind of dismissed it, or they didn't really take the time to try to understand it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big mistake. So I think the same applies to AI now. I think if you're active, really, regardless of what your business is, it doesn't matter, because AI applies to everything. I would say learn as much as you can about it.
That's a great message, and that's a great connection, because I can date myself a little bit as well. I do remember when I guess there wasn't any internet, like when I was what is the word, presented, or when I became aware of the internet was probably in 1990 something, and I got my first account with Hotmail, so my Gmail account, and that's how I learned about it, through a Gmail account. Not a Gmail, I'm lying to you, a Hotmail account. It was a Hotmail. Gmail wasn't back then.
Right.
It was a Hotmail account.
There was no G back then.
And I said, what year did I say?
You didn't
19?
say. You didn't say.
It was like 1990 something, right? So looking at how I was novice, I did take to it. I did want to learn more about it. And it was kind of easy to learn, I think, about it back then, because it wasn't a lot, and it was almost like you could take lessons and learn as you go along, right? And then I had somebody who was showing me things, and it got me interested. But the reason why I'm saying all this and adding all these words is because we look at AI right now, and there are a lot of apps or a lot of opportunities. One, to use it as a tool, and then two, opportunities to learn how to use those tools that are out there now. And we don't want to fall behind like a lot of your friends that you talked about, and some of my friends as well, and not take advantage of and it's not slow like the internet was, but like the progression of AI as it goes into our daily lives, and to your point, forever, right? As long as the internet is working or whatever. Right. So, yeah, I said a lot of words, but I'm just if I want to sum it up in a few letters or a few words, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Get out there and learn some AI, and there are a lot of opportunities to do so.
It's not just AI. I think what enabled me to be successful for as long as I was just in general paying attention to trends.
I like it.
Try to figure out what's working, not only what's working now, but what the landscape is going to be like a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now.
Right.
And pay attention to that stuff. And not all of it is going to be relevant, like any new trend. Some of it hits and some of it misses. And you hope that the thing you focus on is one that is going to be relevant in the future, but try to always pay attention to what's coming down the road is what I would say, regardless of your industry.
Right. And we're going to focus on your industry, the industry that you worked in, and you've seen the advertising industry evolve firsthand. So what are the biggest lessons that you learned along the way that you could pass on to us newbies, or whatever we want to call ourselves?
Yeah, well, the one I just mentioned, paying attention to trends, I would say is, I don't know if there's any bigger idea than that, because that enables you to continue. I don't care what your industry is. What your industry is now, today, February 2025, is probably not what your industry is going to be a year or 2, 5 years from now. So I think that's a very important concept to just reinforce. The other thing I would say is what enabled me to be successful was business relationships. Connecting with the right people. And during the course of anyone's career, you're going to come across certainly many people that are not going to be impressed by you and are not going to grease the wheels for your career. But you also are hopefully going to come across people who are going to support you and help you become successful in your career. So
Right.
I think it's one of the things that I always made a priority was continue networking, continue trying to introduce myself to new people, find kindred spirits, find people that share your perspectives and your goals and may not do exactly what you do, but complement what you do. So together, it's like, listen, Paul McCartney was a very talented musician. So was John Lennon. But would they have been as successful if they hadn't hooked up and teamed up, right?
Yes. Great analogy. Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Do you still use LinkedIn? Are you on LinkedIn?
Yeah. That's probably one of the few social media apps that I check on a regular basis just because I don't know, it's a way of kind of paying attention to, some of my peers who are still active.
Yeah. What do you think about LinkedIn? Why is LinkedIn the only social media campaign?
Because, when it's business art. I mean, listen, I spend a ton of time on TikTok too. So, totally different animal. But, when you've spent your career in a business and suddenly don't need to hustle anymore, it's not, it doesn't mean you're still not interested in paying attention to business-oriented things. So that's what I like about LinkedIn is that I just like seeing what people are talking about, seeing what my peers are up to. Again, I don't really need to use it, but for example, my podcast, that's one of the few things I will post. If I think the podcast came out well, I'll stick that up on LinkedIn when it's done.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So a question came to me, and then you said the podcast. I'll come back to it. Sure. All right. So let's get back to work. So you've done many campaigns throughout your career, right? Nope. I know the question. Here's my question to you.
Right.
You said, hey, in my first 8 years in this industry in my career, I got fired 4 times. And then later on, then you projected to the future. It still was the past. I was honored at the White House, and then I was by the president. I was at the White House, and then I was honored at NATO. Was it NATO?
United Nations.
United Nations. I got all this, stuff that's going on in the news today in my head, so I apologize. Right. Did you learn anything? And I know this is hard to remember, but just look at it in hindsight. Was there something in those 4 hirings, one more than others?
You mean the firings?
Firings. Did I say hirings?
You said hirings, yeah.
I'm fumbling with these words. Is there something in one or all of those 4 firings that helped you pivot, see something differently, helped you to propel yourself, motivate you, any of that? And can you just give a little bit, a snippet of what the firing was about or how it came about? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much you know about the ad business, but I don't think there's any tougher, more cutthroat business than advertising, especially in New York City. I mean, that is Madison Avenue, as they call it, is the mecca for the ad business. And for that reason, the most ambitious people, not just in the country, but in the world, come to New York to try to be successful. And initially, I was afraid of New York for that reason. I didn't think I had the stomach to deal with the challenge of New York. So it took me about 5 years working in other cities. And the irony is I grew up about 2 hours outside of New York. And went to Syracuse University, which is, in New York.
Yeah.
But despite that, just was too intimidated getting out of college. So eventually, I remember when I was maybe 5 years in the business, I was working in Chicago and I was talking to someone and I was saying, I'm not sure what I want to do. I'm thinking maybe I might move to LA and get into the film business. And she said, listen, if you're in the advertising business, I told her, I mentioned I was intimidated by New York. And she said, listen, if you're in advertising and you're any good at it, you got to go to New York. You just got to go to New York. So the firings made me realize that in a big advertising agency, that your political skills are at least as important as your professional skills or your talent. Okay. That you could be the most talented creative guy in the city, but if you don't have the political skills or you are not connected to the right people in that agency, it won't matter how talented you are. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn. Two of the firings happened as a result of the guy who brought me in leaving the agency within a few weeks after hiring me there.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't necessarily think that would be a death sentence for me at that agency, but in essence, it kind of was, because if the guy or woman who wants you to be at that company is no longer at that company, at least in New York in the ad business, it's like, blood in the water for the shark. Know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're very vulnerable. And that happened 2 of the 4 times. So
okay.
What that made me realize is that maybe I ought to pivot and try to reconsider another strategy or direction that would allow me to kind of, if possible, avoid being in an environment where the politics are going to determine my career. And that's when I started doing side projects and doing freelance work on the side. And eventually getting gigs at smaller agencies as a hired gun, where you would go in sometimes for a couple of weeks, sometimes just a couple of days, kind of help them out on something. And oftentimes if they like you after a couple of days or a week, they would keep calling you back or have you stay on. And that was a way of kind of giving me the opportunity to showcase my talent, really without having to deal with the politics, because I was not on staff. I was kind of protected from that. So that for me was, in hindsight, was one of the best decisions I made in my career.
Okay. All right. So that's a best decision. What's a campaign that you worked on that still stands out to you, and why?
Well, probably the campaign that got me honored at the White House. Which I should mention it, because you'd think, how does an average, this guy's bullshit. He didn't really get honored at the White House. He's an advertising guy. Why should I trust him? Right?
I didn't think that.
And I have to tell you, Lee. When you get a letter in the mail and the return address is the White House, you don't think it's actually a letter from the White House, or you think it's just you think they're asking for a political donation. And the thing was that when I got that letter, it was not a campaign year, so it wasn't a year that you would be getting political requests, donation requests. So I opened it up. It was a fancy invitation, inviting me to a special reception. Didn't really say why. It just said, please call this number to RSVP. So I had no idea why I would be getting invited to a White House reception until I called the number. And they said, oh, yeah, John Follis, thank you so much for calling. You guys, it was me and my partner got the invitation. She said, you guys did a great job on that campaign. I said, what campaign? She said, the child abuse campaign. So our agency had the opportunity to do a national TV campaign for child abuse awareness and prevention. That the NBA was donating $5 million worth of their TV media time to run during the NBA playoffs of that particular year. And that's when the Lakers with Magic Johnson was playing against the Bulls with Michael Jordan.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
5 million. So imagine this was 1991, Lee. So $5 million now would probably be twice that. But imagine that amount of money in TV media running over, I don't know, 4 weeks, of a playoff series. So that meant that the spots that I created probably ran 8 or 9 times during every game.
Right.
During the 3 hours of a game.
Wow.
So they were seen by, and that year I did a little research, 28 million people watched the playoffs that year.
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't just that we did, you brought up the idea of impact at the beginning of this interview. The spots I would not have taken the assignment if all they wanted was one of the basketball players reading off of a teleprompter with a little kid sitting on his knee and doing that for 30 seconds. I said, listen, if you want us to do the assignment, when they asked us, I said, you've got to be willing to allow us to do something creative with impact, because this is a great cause. And I know you want your basketball players somewhere in the commercial, but it's not going to have impact if they're just sitting there reading a script.
Yeah.
And so they were a little bit hesitant because they didn't know exactly what I meant by impact. But I said, let me just, they said, okay, show us what you got. And the commercials, for me, I don't think there was any more exciting opportunity in my career than to do a campaign, a national TV campaign for a cause as important as child abuse.
Yeah.
That was running during NBA playoffs. So I really put my heart and soul into those spots, and they were very, very impactful. And as a result, I think all I can assume, Lee, is that the president, George Bush the first at the time, who was a sports fan, must have seen the spots. If he was watching NBA, if he was watching the playoffs that year, he definitely saw the spots, and got some of his people to track down my partner and I and get the invitation to come to the White House. And we were one of maybe a dozen and a half people around the United States that the White House felt needed to be honored for the work that they were doing for various public service causes. So that's probably, I'd say, without question, the campaign that I'm most proud of talking about.
How did you feel when you walked into the White House? Like, how was that experience for you?
Crazy.
Great.
You go through security, and you can't. I mean, you can't believe you're actually there, and it's not part of a tour that you're taking. That you're actually,
exactly.
You're actually an invited guest. So you're just you're like a kid in a candy store, just looking around at all the paintings on the wall and everything. And we didn't meet the president, but we did meet the first lady.
Yeah.
Whose cause, I think her cause was child abuse prevention. So she gave a little talk, thanked everyone for coming, and there are people from around the country. So it's interesting chatting with other people who were there for their various causes. And then they start forming a reception line where you stand in line, you shake the hand of the first lady, and then you get the photo op. And so it was listen, it was how many people can say they were honored at the White House? And then the crazy thing about it was 6 months later, Lee, you get another letter in the mail. This letter has the United Nations as the return address on it. And I'm saying, okay, someone's really, playing me here. This is not real. I opened it up, and that year the United Nations had just started the first ever United Nations Public Service Awards, and they wanted to award advertising, marketing work that they felt embodied the mission of the United Nations. And they had seen actually another public service ad that I did, not these TV commercials, but another ad that I did, which is amazing, that it was for something different. But they saw the ad, they felt it deserved to win this award, and the letter was inviting me to the United Nations to receive my award, which was not, crazy, especially after the White House experience that year. So.
Yeah, I know. Hey, did you ever And listen to these stories. I'm going to ask you anyway. Did you ever suffer from like imposter syndrome? Like you just didn't feel that you were
No.
living up to other people's expectations of you?
Um. Well, I don't. You wouldn't call it imposter syndrome, but I felt that I wasn't living up to my abilities when I wasn't succeeding in the corporate world. So
Okay.
not exactly this thing as imposter syndrome, because imposter
Yeah.
syndrome is like I'm super successful and I don't believe I deserve it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, it's just a self-doubt. It's just a self-doubt. You don't believe you should be in that space for whatever reason.
well, yeah,
And I
I
was just
mean,
curious, yeah, have you ever felt that?
when you get fired 4 times, it's almost impossible not to have self doubts, you know.
That's my point. And then did this visit to the White House, did it kind of validate you? And you probably were already on a roll. So I'm really linking time periods and trying to just put them together. But did that kind of validate you and recharge you?
Of
Um,
course,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
course. I mean, again, I couldn't believe that this was actually happening, that this was a real
yeah.
invitation. Um, so yeah, I mean, I can't imagine any bigger validation,
Hmm.
especially because it kind of it's outside of the box. I mean, winning
Very, very
advertising
outside.
awards, which are behind me there, yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, that's nice. But that that's an industry recognition. That's nice. But when you get something, an honor like the
Wow.
White House or United Nations, that's beyond the pale.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
Good, good, good. I just, people get these type of opportunities that aren't really the norm. I just try to poke in and just, through your experience, just live through that and see how, you felt about it and what it really meant to you. Because we don't always get those type of opportunities to feel that way or to get recognized in that way. You know what I mean?
Yes, and especially for someone in the ad business. I mean, who in the
Yeah,
advertising business gets honored at the White House? I mean, people that get honored at the White House are, you win the Super Bowl, or you cure some disease, or
yeah,
your military service, or something like that,
yeah,
but not because of an ad campaign that you created. So
yeah,
I I,
yeah.
I don't know for sure, but I'm probably the only advertising person to be honored at the White House, and certainly the only ad person and maybe the only business person to be honored at both the White House and the United Nations. So, um,
That's crazy.
it was a great thing that, my parents were proud, let's say that.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. That makes it all the while, I tell you. Hey, many businesses struggle to stand out. We talked about that impact. What's your advice for crafting a message that truly connects with people? And this doesn't have to be an ad, just your advice on creating a message that connects with people.
Yeah. Well, every business and product is different. So, it's, for years I did consulting,
Hmm.
and people would ask me, expecting that there was some kind of silver bullet that would apply to their business. And
Yeah.
the first thing I did before I started giving any advice was just ask a lot of questions, um, because every business product and service is unique. What may work well for one business, or product may not work so well with another one. But
Yeah.
just in general, you really have to, regardless of what your business product or service is, you have to understand your audience, who exactly you're speaking to, because the better you really, really understand your audience, what they're thinking, what they are like as a people, as a person,
Hmm. Hmm.
then you could begin to figure out what might get them excited, and figure out,
Mm.
um, does your product or service is not going to, obviously not going to excite everyone, right?
Hmm.
So you've got to figure out who your audience is that would be excited by your product or service. And once
Mm.
you zero in on because you're not going to again, in order to hit the bullseye, you have to really know what the target is before you can aim and pull the trigger.
There you go. Yeah.
And once you know that, then you could start crafting a strategy, a marketing strategy about how are they, where can I be that they would see my message, right? That's the first thing. What is the media that they're going to come? Is it going to be a podcast? Is it going to be a billboard? What is it going to be? And then once you know the media that would allow them to see your message, then you can begin figuring out, okay, what is the message? What am I going to say that's going to capture? So it's a step-by-step process that really involves a lot of research, quite honestly.
Right. All right. So ask a lot of questions and get to know who it is that you're, sending that message to, and then understanding what the target is. Those are great bits of advice.
And what's going to excite them? Once you know
what's going to excite them,
figure out what is their hot button, right?
Yeah.
What's going to make them want to pay attention?
Yeah, I like that. See, I got that, and I'm mentally writing that down right now, and because I'm still out there, and I still have to convey these messages and talk to customers and clients as well. Right. So this has helped me out, and hopefully it's helping the listeners out. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I'm just talking about strategy. So before you even begin thinking of creative, at least if you're in advertising, you got to figure out, once you know your target and your media, then the question is, well, what is the strategy? And that kind of ties in with
there it is.
What strategy means. And then once you know what the strategy is, then you could begin thinking of the creative. So it's like building a house, right?
Yeah.
Before you start thinking of the color of the house, or what the additions of the house, or the furniture in the house, you got to figure out where should I build the house? What kind of foundation am I going to put into the house?
Important.
And so it's got to be a step-by-step process built from the ground up to be successful.
I like it.
A lot of people, they don't understand that. You just jump right to the creative or whatever. They don't do the important foundational work first.
Okay. I like that. I definitely like that answer. All right. So we're gonna build on top of that. So now, what role does storytelling play in marketing, and how can entrepreneurs leverage it effectively? Now we know in any commercial you see, there's a story being told, and I see a lot of creativity in the ways certain really, commercials are done.
Yeah, it is all about storytelling. I mean, it's a little bit different if you're doing a billboard. Versus a 2-minute commercial.
Okay.
Or a longer format commercial. If you're doing a billboard, you're not telling any stories. You're just grabbing attention with a simple, quick message. So, assuming that you're using a media that allows you to tell the story, it's really important. Even if it's a 30-second commercial, in essence, that's a story. It's got a beginning, it's got a middle, it's got an end.
Yeah.
So you've just got to be very, very effective of communicating that message. It's a very short story, but it is a story that you're telling about your product or service. And it's critical how well you do that. And I would say, regardless of whether it's a 30-second commercial or a podcast, you've got it. Like in my documentary, I made a documentary. Documentary I made was 47 minutes.
Okay.
Which is by far the longest period of time that I had to tell I'm used to telling stories in 30 and 60 seconds. So the challenge was to create something that kept them interested every one of those 47 minutes. Keep them interested. You can't be boring. So regardless of how long your story is, you've got to tell it in a way that captivates them. I think that's a good word. Really captivates them. And it's a real talent to be able to do that, because so many stories after a period of time, people are just going to nod off.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge. How do you tell it in a way that keeps them interested?
Okay. That is the challenge. You have any advice on that? I know you say it's a talent.
Well, again, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's hard to give advice if you're just talking generalities. All I can
Yeah.
say in a general terms, if you're telling a story, you've got to keep them captivated.
Right.
And
Okay.
I think it's a talent. It's a talent. Some people are you listen to speakers, right? Give a presentation. You listen to TED Talks, maybe, right?
Right.
Most people who are at the level of a TED Talk have already succeeded at that ability to tell a good story, because I don't think they would be on a TED Talk stage if they weren't good storytellers.
Storytellers, yeah.
If you listen to any podcast when someone's talking about something, whatever it is, some people tell it in a way that keep you captivated, and some people don't.
Yeah.
So, again, if it's someone who is actually giving a presentation, just hone your skills. Maybe take some courses, public speaking courses. Go to Toastmasters. I don't know if you know what Toastmasters is, but it's a public speaking thing.
Yeah.
When I gave a lot of presentations during my career, so I was very intimidated initially on speaking, but I knew that if I wanted to take my career to another level, I would need to be doing presentations, doing public speaking. So I took Toastmasters. I forced myself out of my comfort zone, to practice and hone my presentation skills. So.
Yeah, I tell you what, one of the things that I do when I go back and I listen and I'm editing a podcast, I'm looking at all the times that I said, I'm looking at all the times that I say, you know what I mean? I know. All these filler words, right? And I try to each time get better at not saying them. And part of that is that preparation, honing your, I just did it right there, honing your craft. So I wholeheartedly agree.
Well, what you just said, I think, is a great learning tool. I know exactly what you're talking about, because I would cringe, and I still cringe when I listen to some of the podcast shows that I've been on, and I just hear myself stumbling over words or saying and ah.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge.
It is.
The more you hear yourself, the better you can, I think, the better you can realize that you just have to learn how to correct yourself. And it's a challenge to do, but one of the best ways to learn is to listen to yourself, right?
Yeah, and correct yourself in the moment. I mean, I fumbled over hiring and firing, but that's just word choice. NATO and United Nations, like all of these, they're still in my head because I'm like, oh, how did I do that? Right. So when you say you beat yourself up over, the ums and the things that you did, I definitely do the same thing. So I
on
just
the other
almost.
hand, Lee, I think no one's perfect, and
no, of course not. Yeah.
The fact that you might stumble a couple of times, whether you're interviewing someone or being interviewed, just means that you're a real person. So I think people who are listening, I would think are not too judgmental about that stuff, as long as you don't do it constantly.
Right. Okay, I like it. Thank you. I feel better now. I feel better. Hey, so for someone who's looking, you did a few pivots throughout your career. For someone who is looking to pivot in their career, what are the key things they should focus on? And I have some answers on that one because I had to do it a couple times. But what are some key things that you think they should focus on once they're pivoting?
Well, the most important thing to focus on is your goal. Because if you don't have a goal that you're working toward, then you could be pivoting in circles, right? So you always have to have that the light at the end of that tunnel
Yeah.
that you're working toward. So for a simple answer is what I would say.
Yeah.
So you make sure that you're pivoting in a way that it's like if you're faced with a mountain. The way I describe it is you can either try to climb the mountain to get over it,
Mm-hmm.
but if that's not working, then you could try to go around the mountain to get
Take a
on the other
while.
side of it. And if that's not working, you could dig under the mountain and try to dig a tunnel and do that way. But your goal is always to get on the other side of that mountain.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
got to be your focus, is getting on the other side of that mountain. And there's more than one way to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You built and led successful agencies.
Well,
Uh,
one that I was a partner in, and then I went solo for about 20 years.
What's the most important leadership lesson that you've learned?
I think you got to respect the people that you are working with,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be a business partner or an employee or associates. You've got to, and if there are people that you don't respect for whatever other reason, you shouldn't be working with them.
Yeah.
But if they are your employees or partners, you've got to treat them with a level of respect. And that's one thing. And I think you've got to lead by example.
Yeah.
You can't just tell people the way things should be. You've got to embody that.
Right.
So I think leading by example is the best way that you can get people to follow you and want to help your vision succeed.
Yeah. Yeah, I've learned a lot of leadership lessons, and I think respect is one of the bigger ones. Don't think that you're at a certain position that you don't have to respect the people who are following you. It should go both ways, right? It makes the dynamic so much more functional.
Yeah, and if there are people, like I said, if there are people that for whatever reason don't deserve your respect,
Exactly.
again, whether it be a partner or anyone else, then you shouldn't continue associating with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're not going to respect everyone, and not everyone deserves to be respected, right?
Right.
If they can't be trusted or they're doing stuff that's unethical,
Mm-hmm.
you just have to make a decision at that point, regardless of what they may be. There may be an opportunity to make money by the association, but you've got to make a decision. What's more important?
Yeah.
A lot of people kind of compromise their values just because of the financial benefits, and I think
Mm-hmm.
on a personal level that was never my focus.
Right.
Money,
Right.
making money and getting rich was never a goal of mine. That was hopefully a benefit of the other things that were my goals.
Right. Okay. Now you had I gotta keep readjusting in the seat because man, you did it. You did it. And this question may not resonate with you. We talked about pivoting in a circle. You may pivot all the way in a circle to answer this question. If you had to start all over again in today's business world, what would you do differently?
Do differently?
Like your career.
Yeah.
And even if you wanted to do it all over back when you did it, it doesn't have to be today's. Just knowing what you know now, looking in hindsight, would you do anything differently?
Yeah, well, it's easier to say in hindsight. But for example, my first job was a terrible job. It was basically just a waste of almost 2 years. I was in a job that was not advancing my career in any way.
Yeah.
At the very least, you should be in a job that it's like connecting the dots. It's like a ladder. It's like you always want to get a job that at the very least is going to advance your career in some way, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you're going to learn something that's going to be advance your career. And my first job, I was really learning nothing that was going to advance my career, and I stayed at it for close to 2 years. So, in retrospect, I probably should have left it much earlier than I did.
Got it. Yeah, those hard lessons, right? And probably, I don't know, put words in your mouth. Maybe even back then you learned that job didn't really help you out. And I know you had some people that talked to you. The one lady who said, "Hey, if you're an ad agency and you're any good, you need to go to New York."
Yeah, that was a few years after that.
Yeah.
When you're just starting out, you don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
Right?
Yep.
And it's your first job, and you keep thinking that if you work hard and you're really doing a good job at what you're hired to do, that you'll get advanced, you'll get promoted. But sometimes if you're really good at what you're hard to do, that's a reason for them not to promote you and just keep you doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So again, it's almost impossible sometimes to have the perspective that you need. But your question was that looking back. And now, it's clear to me that I probably should have left that job a lot sooner.
Right.
But again, I don't say that really with regret, because ultimately my career worked out okay.
Right.
So I try not to have too many regrets. I think all things are learning experiences. So it's not like I learned nothing.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. That's a question. You look back and, in the perfect trajectory, career trajectory, you probably could have just eliminated that one.
Right.
Is just the answer to that one. So I told you I was in the military. I did a few years in the military. And when I came out of the military, it was a little difficult. So for many veterans, how do I want to say this? We sometimes, I absolutely did, struggled with translating my skills into the business world. What marketing or leadership principles from your career could help veterans to better translate their skills into the business world?
I think you just have to be a constant sponge and willing to learn as much as you can from any source you can.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, Lee, that one of the things you enjoy about these podcasts is that you're learning a lot from people that you talk to. You've had many people on here who, regardless of whatever career they've been in or whatever life experience they've had, have overcome obstacles and have been successful. So I can't think of any better opportunity to do what you just referenced, to learn how to about the skills and the mindsets you need to be successful, whether it be marketing or any other aspect of the business world.
This is your opportunity now, and I know we did this a little bit at the beginning of the podcast, but is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to talk about?
We talked about a lot, Lee. You asked some really good questions. I'm not selling anything. So
no, just some words of advice, or just.
I'm better when I'm being asked questions rather than just kind of going off and trying to give advice to people. Hopefully I've said a few things that
you did
have been helpful to your listeners.
All right. Now you said you're not, I don't know. We don't know what the fate of TikTok is, but You said you're really on LinkedIn, but how can the listeners connect with you or learn more about your work, your journey?
Well, if they know how to spell my name, they just need to pop it into Google, because
Okay.
I've been putting up online content since the mid '90s,
Yeah.
and like I said, I've been on close to 90 podcasts in the past 3 years. I've got
Hmm.
a website that's about 500 pages of content, that's still up. Put it
Yeah.
up, I think in '96. It first one up, and I keep adding to it. So all you need to do is spell my name correctly and put it into Google.
Oh, that's so easy. It's
Well,
so
if they know
easy.
my name, it's easy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, well, John, look, I really appreciate it. This has been an incredible conversation for me, and hopefully it was for you as well. It's a a mutually beneficial conversation, because I told you earlier, like, I really want to get to know you and learn, just hearing about ad agency. I know one of the things where I'm at right now, and I'm going off script a little bit. One of the things that they do at the job that I'm at, or the career that I'm at now, they ask you, what is your next step? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? And we have an amazing award-winning marketing department at the company that I work at. And I always had an interest in marketing. I used to do photography, by the way, and did some wedding photography. And you learn different things as you go along about storytelling, about conveying a message, all these things. And I thought I'd be really good at marketing, but I just haven't done it. And to your point, I'll probably look back when 10 years from now and say, I've really stayed in the army too long, and in the supply chain industry, I really should have jumped into marketing a lot sooner. But just hearing your experiences, some of the highs, some of the lows, really helps me to better understand, I guess, a little bit of some of the expectations of that role, the creativity, the storytelling, the politics, of being in your particular space. Um, and I just appreciate all the knowledge that you've given me specifically. All right. I just wanted to say that. And then you talked a little bit about the evolution of marketing, um, to the power of storytelling, leadership, reinvention, and your insights on creativity and making an impact are invaluable. You can see I'm back on script. And I know our listeners will take away some powerful lessons. And I just want to thank you for sharing your journey with me, with us. And if you enjoyed this episode, now I'm talking to you, the listener. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to Hindsight the Podcast so that you don't miss any future episodes. And until next time, keep pushing forward and be more. John Follis, I thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
I did too, Lee. Thank you so much again for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for joining me here on Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. And while I have you here, why don't you take your mouse, go over and click on that subscribe button? No, not right there. Over to the right. No, down, right there. Boom. Thank you. Now, thank you for subscribing to Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones.